Welcome to Functions lecture. So functions help to reduce the amount of code, can be called anywhere in the notebook or cell. Functions must be given a name and can have multiple parameters or none at all. And a parameter can have default values. And really, functions are applicable to any programming language, not just Python. Okay, so let's just start off with a very basic function. We'll do def, and that's what we use before we actually assign the name to the function. So in this case, we'll say square. And notice that this is lowercase, and that's the way that we have the function named. It's always going to be in lowercase, that's by convention. And then we'll put in our arg1 and arg2 and colon. Then we'll do return arg1 plus arg2. So functions always have def before they have the name. They don't always necessarily have to have return. It can be a print as well. But there is an important distinction between print and return, I'll show in a moment. So we have square, let's say we put in 20 and 50, and we should get 70 as the output. And what we could also do is, let's say we have num, and now we actually have num assigned as 70. So we assigned a variable called num to the value 70, the integer 70. And the interesting thing is, if we were to remove the return and just have prints, and we of course have to encapsulate the arg1 plus arg2, and then we try, we'll get the output of 70 because it's been printed. However, if we were to then run num, we don't get any output, and that's because print doesn't actually assign the value of 70 to num. Only the return does that when you're using functions. So if you want to actually assign it to a variable, any kind of calculated value or a string or anything of the sort, then you have to use the return, not the print. And we do this again, and we have 70 as we had before. Okay, what we can also do is assign default values, as I stated before at the beginning. So say we have 20 and 50, and then we remove the values here. Let's call this val instead, just in case. And we run this, run that, and now we have 70. So we don't actually have to put any values in the arg1 and arg2 within the actual function when we're calling it, but that's because the arg1 and arg2 already have default values. But we can actually override them. So let's say, for instance, we do 90 and we do 110, we should get 200. And then we run that. As you can see, we have 200. So we've overridden the arg1 and arg2 default values. What we can also do is add what's called a docstring. So just make some space here, so it's getting a bit cluttered. And of course, that's by not one double string, but you need to have 3 on either end. So a total of 6 altogether. And we'll just write some sort of description of what the function does. This adds 2 numbers together. Okay, so nothing's really happened at the moment, but if you hover your cursor in the parameters section of the function and hold Shift and Tab, you can see you get signature, which gives you the square arg1 and arg2 with the default values, but also we have the docstring where it says this adds 2 numbers together, which is what we wrote here. And if we hit the plus icon, we've got the location of the function in memory, and of course it says type function. Okay, let's just remove that. And what else we can do is just check. So we do type square, and it tells us that it's a function, just like we showed a moment ago when we did the plus, and then we have the type function here. Okay, so moving on from that, and what we're going to do is scroll down just to make some space here, and we'll delete that val, and we could do def squared as opposed to square num colon, and we'll do return num, and then we'll do def cubed num colon return num 3 this time, and lastly we'll do quad num colon return num raised to the power 4. So one's raised to the power 2, 3, and 4 respectively. And if we do v equals 4, and then let's make some spaces here, scroll this down, and if we hold the control and then hit left tab, then left tab, we'll do print, and then we'll do squared v, so the variable v equal to 4. We'll just change this to cubed, and of course the last one we'll change to quad. We run this, so you have 16, 64, and 256. Okay, and what we can also do is actually add the values together. Because we're returning them, we can add each of the values from the functions squared, cubed, and quad together to make a final value. So if we do total, let's say squared v plus cubed v plus quad v, we do total, we should have a total of all 3 of these numbers, and you have 356. Okay, so moving on from that is something a little bit more interesting, and that's going to be the greet function. So we do def greets, doesn't take any parameters, we'll create a doc string, let's say enter the time and print appropriate greeting. Okay, we've got time equals eval, inputs, enter the time, and then we'll do some control flow. So time, if it's greater than 6, so it's going to be either good morning, afternoon, good evening, or good night. So if time is greater than or equal to 6 and time is less than 12, colon, print good morning. Oopsie. Good morning, exclamation mark. And if we do return squared time, and then we'll do, actually we'll leave this squared time for now. I'll show you in a moment what happens there in a moment, but we'll do elef time greater than or equal to 12 and time is less than 18, colon, print afternoon, and then elef time greater than or equal to 18 and time less than 21. So obviously this is 24 hours in a day, so this would be 6 a.m., 12 is the afternoon, and greater than 12 and less than 18 is between 12 and 6 p.m. And this is going to be between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And then we'll do print good evening. Whoops, keep doing that mistake. And then lastly, if it's none of those, it's obviously going to be good night. And then if we run that, let's say we do, and before I actually run that, just to point out that if we do time, or rather if we do inputs, enter a number, and we enter, let's say 90, we get a string, as you can see here, because it's in the single quotation marks. So what we have to do is convert this into an integer, or a float. Rather, we've got to convert it into a number. So we're removing the strings, and we do this, let's say we do 8, we get an actual integer in this case, or we could do, say, 9.123, and we get a float. Okay, so it's no longer a string, and then we can use that when we're doing the conditional operators. And if we just remove that, and let's say we do greet, now we can put in any number that we like, so it's between, let's say we put in 10, we get good morning because it's in between 6 and 12. And if we run this again and we do, say we want to have afternoon, well, we'll do, let's say, 14, good afternoon, run this again, and we do 20, we're going to get good evening. And lastly, if we do 23, which is going to be 11 p.m., we get good night. Okay. And lastly, I want to just show that if we did the return as opposed to the print, squared time, and then we'll do cubed time, and we'll do, oopsie, that should be a return here, return, and then return quad time, and for this one at the bottom we'll just do return time. Okay, now if we do 3, we get good night 3, and the reason why it's only 3 as opposed to any of the other numbers is because it's not greater than 6, it's less than 6, so it's just going to be referring to the else, so you just get 3 put out. But let's say we do 7, so we run and put 7 in, that's going to be 49, because that's going to be with the squared, which is 7 times 7, or 7 squared, and therefore you get 49, even though they hadn't been able to do something greater than 12, or equal to 12, so if we do 12, we're going to get a cube number, which is going to be quite large, 1728, and if we get a larger number, so if we do 18 plus, then let's do 20, we're going to have 160,000, so it's going to have the good evening and it's going to return. And what we can do is number, we'll do this, and let's say we do 7 again for good morning, and then we have number, and we get 49. Okay, so that concludes my lecture on functions. I hope that's been insightful, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.